Once the fire was contained, this monitoring was no longer needed. Common sense, that doesn't make sense to me why you would stop air monitoring because the fire is out, as we've learned in other instances. Once the contamination is in the soil, water, air, there's a lot of different things, including weather changes, the earth moving.
Again, it's the same disingenuous nonsense that's meaningless. And first of all, the smoldering fire went on for a few more days. There's ongoing leaks. I saw it. I actually saw a resident at the town hall. He mowed his lawn and it looks like, boiled, blistered lesions on his skin, burning. And
Wow.
you can feel it driving around.
You want to see what real independent journalism funded by the people for the people looks like?
You ever heard a story like this in America?
You're looking at it.
Congratulations for always being somewhere where mainstream media is not.
Flint, Michigan.
See you in Nevada.
Thanks to people like you, we can get the truth. Corporate media, they've been lying to us for years, and you're going straight to the people.
You are the man. I'm glad you're here.
Status Coup. Status Coup.
For as low as 16 cents a day, you'll keep us on the ground, covering the important stories the corporate media covers up. Hey, it's Jordan. Happy to be joined by Scott Smith, nationally acclaimed independent chemical tester. You've been all over the country, Flint, Michigan, East Palestine, Monterey County, California, long list, Conyers, Georgia, and now Roseland, Louisiana, after a massive oil plant explosion, which frankly has not gotten much national media attention. You just held a town hall there.
I tested for 29 metals. I found a wide variety of metals that are really high concentrations in soot, and we need to ask questions of why it's there. And when I first got here, I saw children running around in yards, pets, and soot everywhere. And the issue is the EPA declared the soot safe without ever testing it.
Shockingly, I'm being sarcastic, you, through your preliminary testing, have found higher chemical contamination levels and possible chemicals of concern than the EPA. So let's start there. You were there last night. Before we get to the chemicals and what you found, can you talk to me about, in the short amount of time you have been there, what are the residents expressing to you as far as symptoms they might be having, concerns, and the response they've gotten from their state officials and the EPA?
Well, Jordan, just the recent events I'm all involved in, from East Palestine, Conyers, Georgia, Moss Landing, California. It's the same playbook, unfortunately. Residents come forward. They didn't have the symptoms before the incident. They're being dismissed. Everything's fine. And, the PTSD, it's in your head. Ubiquitous chemicals in the environment. You're the problem. Blame the victims. All those narratives are cranking up.
And have any of them expressed issues they're having? Because, some folks I've talked to, you've heard of headaches, nausea. In some cases, people have said they've had skin burning. What have you heard from residents?
Yeah, I actually saw a resident at the town hall. He mowed his lawn and it looks like, boiled, blistered lesions on his skin, burning. And
Wow.
you can feel it driving around. As I tested my second round, wear a respirator when I'm close to it, but even getting out and walking around the car, just like East Palestine, just like Conyers, you can feel it when you breathe. Your lips go numb. You feel it, the burning on the skin. These residents aren't making up. And the bottom line, Jordan, is that none of these residents, just like East Palestine and Conyers and Moss Landing, they didn't have any of these symptoms before these incidents. It's that simple.
So I want to first tell you what the EPA told me, which in a long list of absurd statements I've gotten from the EPA, this might take the cake here, and then we'll get to what you found. I reported on a school that's just a little over a mile away that was still open, Roseland Montessori, despite clear images I was getting that students were learning in a pool of oil. I mean, there's oil residue, potential toxic soot, ash all over the school. So I asked them, students, school staff, nearby residents have expressed, some had bloody noses, breathing problems, nausea, headaches, burning skin. Again, why is the school still open? They basically told me we don't control whether the school's open, and residents experiencing health problems should contact their personal physician or the Louisiana Poison Center. Then when I asked what specifically has the EPA tested since the explosion and how far away from the plant, can you give me a list of chemicals and chemical byproducts the EPA is testing for? They wrote me seemingly a lawyered up answer. Under EPA's statutory authority, EPA's cleanup objective is to remove all recoverable runoff material from the Smitty's supply site. That's the plant that exploded, the Tangipahoa River, and nearby impacted areas such as pond and ditches. EPA is conducting air monitoring for VOCs and benzene and conducted air monitoring for PMC 2.5 until September 2nd. Was set up to monitor particulates coming from the facility fire. Once the fire was contained, this monitoring was no longer needed. They said more. I'm not going to bother. Before we get to what you found, common sense, that doesn't make sense to me why you would stop air monitoring because the fire is out, as we've learned in other instances. Once the contamination is in the soil, water, air, there's a lot of different things, including weather changes, the earth moving that could shift around chemicals. What do you make of what the EPA told me?
Again, it's the same disingenuous nonsense that's meaningless. And first of all, the smoldering fire went on for a few more days. There's ongoing leaks. I saw it. We can get to that. And there's ponds full of fresh oil, and they should be air monitoring. Also, there's a first here, Jordan. I was on the ground who was testing for the first time my fellow whistleblower client with the Government Accountability Project, Robert Prodel, in the aspect plan. And I can't say a lot, but I can say whistleblowers are coming out of the woodwork with the two of us now coming out publicly. And the same EPA aspect plane. Remember in East Palestine, how they shut the sensors off over the creeks, how they claimed they couldn't fly the plane in bad weather. Well, there's all kinds of issues coming to light. And it's the bottom line is whether you're doing water or soil testing like me in the air, you can't find what you don't look for. If you don't put the sensors on the plane on, if you don't fly over the residential areas, you can't find anything. It's that simple.
And let's talk about what you found, because there were some preliminary acknowledgements from the EPA that they found heightened levels of potential toxins by the plant. But other than that, they said everything is fine, go home, nothing to see here. But your testing, what have you found? Again, preliminary, there has to be more testing.
Yeah, that's correct.
What have you found, and how far away from the plant?
Well, when I got there, I was 20 hours on the ground, and I was about, 2 to 3 miles southeast and directly east. And I looked for, first of all, 29 metals, dioxins, and what's called the semi-volatile organic compounds. The EPA only looked for 8 metals. And the EPA tested the soot mixed with water from a ditch. I have no indication that they've tested the actual soot. So here we go again. I tested the actual soot, that was rained down from the sky. And
so for those who possibly failed chemistry and don't know this stuff, the EPA testing water that was mixed, soot that was mixed with water is kind of meaningless. You're not going to get accurate levels.
No, you're going to get dilution to it, and you're going to miss some things. So they not only, tested soot mixed with, soot mixed with water. They only tested for 8 metals, and it's what they did not test for too. They did not test for dioxins. They did not test for the other compounds. And the issue, and then they declare everything safe with this. And then if you read their press release and the media, they said they relied on CTEH, the contractor that works for Smitty's. And what do we know about CTEH? Same contractor in East Palestine, same contractor in Conyers, same contractor in Moss Landing. And there's a whole host of whistleblowers coming out forward about how all this air testing is gamed. And I can't go any further than that right now because, Robert Crowder and I are out publicly. We're built differently. We're up for the challenge of the attacks. but some of the, the anonymous whistleblowers have to be protected. And we guarantee they do that. But the good news is,
and just so the audience knows, Robert Crodel was a longtime EPA official, and he came out after the East Palestine disaster, which in my view was a criminal act by Norfolk Southern that never needed to happen. The explosion of those toxic chemicals in the rail cars, and he basically blew the whistle that a very important plane that the federal government uses to fly over these chemical disasters and monitor potential contamination was basically benched. It was not used for the first key days after the train derailment and chemical detonation under very suspicious circumstances. And then when it was used, they somehow turned off the actual monitors to check for chemicals over the contaminated creeks and other places in East Palestine.
Yep, and let me add more context for your viewers because they're familiar with East Palestine. Robert Crodel has a PhD in physics and chemistry. I forget which specific chemistry, but he designed the software to test for air in that aspect plane. And to put it in that context, Paige Delgado from the EPA, who runs that program, and Mark Durno apparently were close. And in East Palestine, they accused him of committing perjury. He gave a sworn affidavit, and I gave a sworn affidavit. None of these EPA people are given sworn affidavits under the penalties of perjury. And he is he's incredibly, he may be one of the smartest human beings I've ever met. I said that at the town hall. And we're really seeing having the guy that designed the air testing on the ground in the disaster testing with me, and seeing what I'm getting, the benefits of that are incredible for this community. And you think about this, Jordan, the EPA with their $17 billion budget, you think they could have the air testing guy on the ground and all these other disasters in East Palestine. It's relatively easy to do what Robert and I are doing. We test together, we compare the results, we look at them, and we are uncovering some major things that are going to be announced. Probably it is soon to be announced next town hall, because he's seeing some of the compounds I'm finding, like the bis-2 ethyl phthalate. And for those that aren't in chemistry, that you can Google phthalates, and where do you get those? They're plasticizers in vinyl chloride PVC compounds. What did Smitty's make? I'm being told they made PVC plastic pails. And and what we found is 12,000 parts per billion. Never seen that before in this, in the soot. So
in English, so the audience understands, these are likely highly carcinogenic. Vinyl chloride causes all forms of cancers. So whatever they were manufacturing and the combustion created from that explosion and fire is very threatening to public health.
Yeah, and again, I'm a small part of an incredible team that includes Robert and all these other people. And I understand from some of the toxicologists, if I understand correctly, the phthalates can be mutagenic, and some of these other compounds, I believe, and affect genetics and things like that. And we're hearing all the stories about the dead fish and impacted dead animals. And I've seen stuff, the sticky soot on crops that I tested. I'm also testing crops that I witnessed just yesterday. It's worse than Conyers. And let me tell you, I thought I'd seen it all with the soot, visible soot and ash raining down from the side in Conyers. But you had with the soot coming down, it was raining oil. People's pools are filled full of oil. And we'll be releasing a lot of that. And we're just scratching the surface on the testing right now.
And by the way, I mean, there's video, photos showing oil, sheens of oil, 40, 50 miles downriver. So this is not just, they always do a 1 mile evacuation around these chemical disasters, plant fires, explosions. This seems to be going much further than a mile. And you posted photos, I've seen it, dead frogs, dead fish. I mean, it does not seem that this has been contained. And it seems, I mean, they call Louisiana, parts of Louisiana, Cancer Alley. And this state, separate from the EPA, this state has a long history of very lax environmental regulation and kind of looking at the other way of chemical contamination. Can you kind of talk about what you have found that concerns you so far in terms of high levels of certain heavy metals, potentially VOCs, and what further testing? What are you testing that you would implore the EPA to do the same?
Yeah, and I'm in the New Orleans airport doing this, and I don't have all the specific numbers in front of me, but what I can tell you, nickel. Nickel is very one of the most concerning metals, and with it in the soot mixed in with, we all need manganese, we all need barium, but you're talking, upwards of 1,000, concentrations that in reviewing with like Robert Prattle and other people on my team, they haven't seen, and they're very concerned because you can aerosolize this with pets running around and children. For example, some of the soot I tested from August 24th, I was there within 48 hours. There was a yard where I saw children running around with soot up to their knees and pets running around. And I walked up to the resident and said, you might want to be careful. Would you like your soot tested? That's some of the stuff coming back. The fact that the EPA is saying, nothing to see here, and all the elected officials are saying that. But let me make one exception here. The mayor, in 19 years of doing this, and this is the 80th disaster, I have never had a mayor reach out to me. And the mayor of Roseland sat down with me before the town hall, and we're in active discussions. And I'm very optimistic about this. At the same time, it's very sad. In 19 years, in 80 disasters, no other elected official has sat down and wanted to do something. This mayor is first class, and he cares very much about the community, and he's being affected by this too.
And can I just ask you, this is not a conservative versus liberal viewpoint, just a common sense question. When you have a school a little over a mile away that has oil residue all over it, we got the pictures. You're talking in the parking lot, on windows, on AC units. So we don't know if the oil residue is inside the AC, pumping that into the school, on the roof. Everywhere. Kids are tracking oil on their feet into the school, out of the school. A parent I spoke to said when she dropped off her kid the first day, this is like 2 weeks ago, the smell was horrible. A teacher or a staff member was complaining of nausea. Isn't it just common sense that school should be closed? I know school closures in America are controversial, but shouldn't that be closed until like a hazmat crew gets in there? There's more thorough cleaning.
Absolutely. Children, like immunocompromised people, you should always err with abundance of caution and assume it's the worst until you have data that says otherwise. And another thing, Jordan, is in my presentation, I showed how what you received from the EPA was very helpful. The EPA is saying they had nothing to do with the school, but yet you've seen the messages from a resident. I think you interviewed her, Jessica Parker, if I remember her name correctly. Then the school's saying the EPA says it's okay. That's part of the other game here. They'll tell the media and affected residents that no, the EPA says it's okay. And the EPA says no, it's not us. It's just unacceptable.
Unbelievable. And I want to zero in because this is beyond Roseland as to, we use the term playbook here. And we've mentioned this company CTEH, which to me is kind of the corporate cleanup crew. This is not my opinion. This is just, here's one thing from the New York Times. Headline: Record of BP Gulf worker testing firm raises conflict of interest questions. CTEH has been used by major corporations like BP after the Gulf spill in 2010. They were used by Norfolk Southern after the train derailment in East Palestine. They seem to be used, the go-to company, by corporations, and magically they never really find chemical levels of concern. To me, I know there's been cuts in the EPA, but why is the EPA constantly allowing the companies who have a clear legal and financial motivation to minimize the damage? Why is the EPA allowing the testing to be basically offshored to companies who it's their motivation to make their client, in this case, Smitty's Supply, happy. This is a company that has major conflict of interest concerns and has continually found nothing to see here. And there has been accusations that they manipulate data, they cherry pick their testing. I mean, it kind of seems like, why would you have the murderer do the investigation?
I can't say it any better. It's the murderer doing the investigation. All I have to add, what you just said perfectly, is that what I call the incestuous revolving door. So you got taxpayer funded, you know, people at the EPA that are supposed to be protecting these residents. A lot of them are essentially auditioning for early retirement to go to CTEH. You know, an average EPA employee with benefits is about 130, 150,000 a year. They can go into industry and work for contractors like CTEH and make 2 to 3 times that and take early retirement and still get a pension on all of us. So we're paying for a lot of this stuff, which is totally unacceptable.
I want to read to you what the EPA told me. I said, has the EPA tested solid soot and or ash? They said an environmental service contractor for Smitty's Supply, referencing CTEH, sampled soot under the oversight of Louisiana Department of Environmental Quality. EPA's risk evaluation of these samples determined it did not present an immediate public health threat. So not an immediate threat. About later, who knows?
Did they say immediate? They said imminent to other media. Did they say immediate there to you?
Yeah, immediate public health threat. This
No,
was
that's
based,
the word. That's the key word. Okay.
1 second. This was based on the exposure pathway of contaminants in soot, which occurs through dermal skin contact and ingestion inhalation. To reduce the chance of these exposures, residents are advised to wash homes, cars, and other outside surfaces, as well as to wash hands frequently. So besides what we already went over, which is why is the EPA offloading this to a private company? You know, they would say, well, we do our own testing too. But this is the initial testing, which in a lot of cases, including in East Palestine, is the basis for some of these legal settlements, highly questionable testing. And then they're saying, well, there's no imminent threat. Okay, so maybe not today, but in 6 months, it's absurd.
This is a great point. Let me break that down. This is maybe one of the most important 2 points of the interview. Number one, I've had residents reach out where I'm tested, where they listen to this nonsense and they pressure wash. They had no, you know, these residents, they think they can believe what they're being told by all their elected officials and government. So they pressure washed, and one resident has to remain anonymous, is in the remediation business and had all his hazmat gear pressure washed and got really, really sick. And this is what Robert Frodel and all the other experts around me will tell you. You start pressure washing, you start moving this, stepping on it, you're going to aerosolize it, break it up, and you put it into the air, and you create potential risks, not just dermal contact, but inhalation. These are what the experts around me are saying. Number two, and here's the second point, the words is, you know how clever the EPA can be and all these PR, the word imminent or immediate. Well, it's not an immediate threat today, but what down the road? And what is today? It is 9/11. And I, getting ready to check out of the hotel today, I couldn't help but stop in my tracks as I heard on the various news channels, about the dust particles and about how it took, 5, 10, 20 years, first responders, people affected, they're no longer here with us. And they got all similar, symptoms as you're seeing from East Palestine and these other areas and all these cancers and how it takes a while. But, and Jordan, much appreciated that you are covering it in depth, but the rest of the media, they just don't wake up. They're covering this about 9/11, about dust particles and, all the basically products of incomplete combustion from what happened on 9/11. And most of the known responders, if unfortunately are no longer with us or are severely ill, just like what's happening in these communities.
I'd like to ask a bigger picture question because, obviously there's so many epidemics in this country, mass shootings, tragically now more political violence. But, as a journalist, I can't really keep up with these chemical explosions. It seems like there's a new one every week, every month. I have a list that's not in front of me, but from East Palestine to Conyers, Georgia, to the Salad Bowl area in California. There was a plastics factory fire in Indiana earlier this year or last year. Refineries in Texas, now this in Louisiana. And you see a pattern with the EPA saying nothing to see here, absurd 1 mile evacuation zones. But you also see a pattern that it typically comes out that these companies where you have fires, explosions, have history of environmental regulatory violations, where if they get a fine, it's very small. There's very little oversight, frankly, across the board, even in more liberal states of chemical factories. There's very little known, even by the emergency responders, local politicians, what the hell they are manufacturing in these plants. There's virtually no actual emergency response. There seems to be more money put into marketing and PR to say nothing to see here than an actual emergency response. And this is why, to me, this is much bigger to the audience watching. I mean, this could kind of happen anywhere, and it is happening more often everywhere. You've been doing this kind of independent testing for many years. Have you noticed this kind of rapid increase in these disasters and kind of the cover-ups that are happening right after?
Yeah, and again, great point. And I have a couple things to add to that. First of all, the Indiana explosion. I'm working in 5 active contamination events right now with this one. And I haven't even, my phone is blown up over whatever happened in Indiana. I can't even speak to that. I haven't had time to look at it, but they are happening at an accelerated pace. The other thing, Jordan, is that this is not a political issue. You can go back to, George Bush, BP under Obama, the first Trump administration. You had contamination events, and you had Biden, you had Conyers and East Palestine, and now you have Roseland. So what people need to understand, this is complete systemic failure across both parties, across state and government agencies. And you can call it capture, whatever, it's in money. And these, like, for example, in Smitty's, General Honore, you might want to interview him. He's the guy that is really well respected. He turned out he was following me, reached out to me, and I really welcomed him. He showed up at the town hall and he spoke, and I'm going to be working with him among many other people. But he told me that Smitty's had hired the ex-head of the Louisiana DEQ. Now, I have no reason not to believe that true if the general's telling me that. But right there you go. Well, what do you have in common with that? Look, I was subpoenaed in my driveway, Norfolk Southern, ex-EPA attorney Davina Kajara. It's what I talk about, this incestuous revolving door that should be prevented conflicts of interest. So how are these companies getting away with it? It's almost like they're buying undue influence and hiring these ex people that were regulators, and then they're having they're not putting proper safety. I believe there's a way. If you put people over profits and invest in safety long term, you're going to be more profitable. But first and foremost, you're doing the right thing for the future. And its bottom line is the profits over people is catching up with all this, and it should be people over profits.
And lastly, obviously, you don't have to go into details, but you've alluded to there's more whistleblowers coming out of the works and will be coming out of the works. I know a little bit about some of this stuff. I haven't reported any of it because I don't have permission to yet. But I know there's some whistleblowers, in various communities from East Palestine to this that will be coming out. Without giving too many details, can you kind of share what's the basic kind of trend with the information you're finding out from whistleblowers? Not the specifics, because you can't detail that now, but is it wrongdoing within the EPA, within local agencies, kind of top officials looking the other way? What can you share?
I would say, without getting into the details, we have now got insight from whistleblowers across all these different disasters, how the contractors working for the responsible parties coordinate with the EPA and coordinate with some of the state agencies. Nothing to see here, and how specifically test results are manipulated. And a big piece of this is the air testing. the water testing. We have great insight into how things are being manipulated. There are some very courageous people, and I don't blame them for wanting to stay anonymous. They are coming forward with great risk to their own safety. But these are incredible, courageous heroes, these whistleblowers that are coming forward. And after every town hall, and it's great that you're doing this long form coverage because the whistleblowers are coming forward at an escalating pace.
And one more question, because I know before he became the head of health, Department of Health and Human Services director, you spoke with RFK Jr. about what happened in East Palestine. I kind of alluded to interest and, remedying some of the issues. Without getting into RFK, I've given my view on the man. It would seem under the Make America Healthy Again camp movement, avoiding children being poisoned, their air, their water, their soil would be top priority here. Have you gotten a response from RFK? Is he paying attention to these ever increasing chemical disasters? Because we do know if specifically children are being overloaded with high heavy metals, volatile organic compounds, benzene, the list, dioxins. I mean, that's a lifelong, maybe not right away, but that's a premature death sentence. What's your message to RFK Jr. and, the officials that are claiming they want to reverse a lot of this, regulatory capture?
Well, first of all, RFK Jr., like some other officials at the time, reached out to me in East Palestine. We didn't know he was going to end up Secretary of Health and Human Services. And I was very clear in the video I made when he was with me testing and meeting with the Wayne O'Connell, whose unfortunately cancer has spread. And I said, it doesn't matter. It's not about politics. We can all agree on the future and human health. And that is the basis. And you don't have to agree on everything. But I can tell you from some of his senior people and some of the communications I have sent to him directly, there has been an attempt in the background, and we would like to see more. But obviously, there's a lot going on. And I am still hopeful that, whether it's this administration, the next one, I will always meet with anybody, Democrat, Republican, socialist, it doesn't matter to me, but anybody that reaches out. And I'm always hopeful that if it's not this administration, the next one will do something. They are aware of things. And I can tell you this should be part of Make America Healthy Again, especially what went on at that school and letting kids go back without proper testing. It's just totally unacceptable.
Thank you. I know you're running to a flight. You will stay on what's going on in Louisiana, as well as the 4 other communities you're juggling. We will stay in touch. Thanks for talking.
Okay. Thanks, Jordan. Thanks a lot.